we've got the design sorted, approved by the my personal conservation officer, the wife, and it's going to look something like that when it's done. So it's 4-panelled, top 2 panels glazed, fairly typical Victorian design. So I prepped up all the wood. It's all flat, square, true to the right dimensions. If you want to know what the dimensions are, have a look at the website. Should be a link somewhere over there in the description. There's 3 long pieces. Those are for the stiles and the middle piece. Those 3 there are the rails, bottom, middle and top. The joints I'm going to be using are mortise and tenons. Bottom rail, middle rail, I've got twin tenons, and I'm going to fox wedge those, and then the top rail is going to be a single haunch tenon. First part of the job is going to be marking out the rails to cut the tenons, and from that, once I've cut those, I'll mark out the stiles to cut the mortises. Right, the first part of the marking out is to get the length of the rails from there to there. Right, I've taken that mark up to the bottom edge and across. Next part of the marking out I'm going to be doing is that part of the tenon. I'm going to mark that off on all of them. Dimension for that I've got as 30mm, and I'm going to mark it with the knife, bring the edge up to it, and I've got a good sharp edge there. So I'll carry on and mark that up, taking it across to the face as well, because I'm going to be sawing down this. Right, the next bit of marking out is lengthways across the tenon, and that gives us the haunch bit in there. And for that I'm going to be using a marking gauge, simple tool, very easy to use, gives you a nice parallel line to whatever edge you're off. So first we want to mark the size of that haunch. Well, I'm marking the actual tenon here, and I'm wanting it at 75mm, so I'll just put a mark in there. And then we have to set the gauge exactly to that. Oh, and as if by magic that one's right. If it's not, just give it a little tap, or a little tap that way, and you should get it right. Okay. Right, this is a stage that I have to keep telling myself not to miss out. The old adage of measure once and cut twice, or is it the other way around? So right, I'm measuring twice, cutting once. So I'll refer to my drawing. So the top one comes off 30mm, and I want to be cutting that bit out. No use marking it up and then cutting the wrong bit out. Right, ready to saw these out now. If I had a bandsaw it'd be no problem, just whiz them off, but as I haven't, I'm going to try with the jigsaw. And so on. The next thing is to cut the faces of the tenons. Now, you could do that on a bandsaw if you've got one. Can't do it on the jigsaw. I could do it by hand, but I'm a bit too lazy for that. I've got a router table with a cross slide on it, so I shall be using that, and that'll get me perfectly accurate faces, so when I assemble it everything will be coming up square. Right, the thickness of the tenon depends on the width of the mortise that you're going to be cutting. I'm going to be cutting the mortises with the mortising machine, so I've got set sizes to work to, and I'll be using that one, which is as close to a third of the piece of wood. Right, so I'm going to be cutting the cheeks off using the router table on the cross slide, and I want to get that face bang on square. If I get all those square, I know the door's going to be square. To make sure I get that dimension exactly bang on, and each one, that one and that one, perfectly in line with each other, you'll see here on the cross slide I've got a sacrificial piece of wood, and I'm going to run that across against the cutter. I'll cut the end off the sacrificial piece of wood so I know exactly where the edge of that cutter is going to be. And now when I'm offering up my tenons to cut off on the router, I can square that up exactly, my scribed line exactly with the end of that block. Last bit of setting up I've got to do is the height of the router cutter to cut the faces of the tenon on both sides. So I'm flipping it over and cutting that edge to get that, so that leaves me a tenon that's exactly the same size as the mortising tool. See, yes, just about there. So now I've got the tenon bang in the middle of the joint. I've quickly zipped down and taken most of the material off under there, and now for the final cut I've just got to line up the marked and scribed. I've been down there with a Stanley knife and cut down so any breakout will just snap off without going down the edge of the rail. And I can take that final cut. Which gives me a perfect join, face of the tenon cut, bang on square down there, and bang on the right depth. And that's not a bad surface for a tenon. So now I shall be cutting the other side, and on the final cut lining that edge up with the routed end of that sacrificial piece. So there we have it. Perfectly cut tenon. That's the first part done, cutting the tenons. Next part will be cutting the mortises and wedging. If you want to know any more details, just log on to www.idostuff.co.uk and follow the links through.